All right, welcome to this special video, which will serve as an introduction, or perhaps we should call it a pre-introduction, for Laboratory 5, which is a laboratory that will be exploring simple biomechanical concepts that are at play in your own body and those of fellow animals in terms of how muscles are controlling joints and moving bones to do various types of work. You'll be doing these types of explorations using a mechanical arm model that previous faculty at City College actually developed. So what you'll be doing is basically exploring concepts governing systems, particularly this one, the bicep system, where you have a biceps muscle that helps, in this case, lift the forearm up, and triceps muscle that helps bring it back down. The model will be simulating basically this biceps element of it, so that you'll have a pulley and the ability to adjust this lever, which then acts to exert force and pull up the arm in the same way that the muscle does by attached here to using this tendon to the bone. And then you'll be putting weights here, sort of simulating how you can put weights in your hand and how to compensate for that. We'll have to have increased muscular force produced by the bicep. Okay, so what we're going to do in this video, the main point here is to talk a little bit more about what's going on with the activation of muscles and a little bit of the anatomy and physiology of the muscles. And so this video is sort of then serving as kind of a prelude to the lab itself, which deals more just specifically with biomechanics. I should also put a little plug here that muscle is one of the main topics covered in my elective course, Biology 45100, which you will all be qualified to take after passing this course, and indeed will be offered next semester in the spring, although that's for people currently watching this in fall 2018. I'm not so sure this will hold for people watching it in the future. Anyhow, okay, so let's look at what's going on anatomically with this biceps muscle system. So first of all, there's some principles that are governing what's going on with muscle and bone and joints in general, regardless of where they are in the body. And that's that you'll have a muscle, which is then going to be attached versus different tendons to the bones at different points, and such that when the muscle then contracts, or specifically shortens, then the bone will then move. Okay, notice a couple things here. One is that just some of the nomenclature. So the place where the muscle meets the bone, the place more to the closer to the core of the body, generally, is that we refer to as the origin, and the part where it's attached further away from the core of the body, basically closer to where the work is actually going to be done, is referred to as the insertion. Okay. The other thing to notice here is that, like most joints, what's going on here is a rotation, an angular rotation. So here you have the elbow joint. The muscle will pull on it, and there'll be a rotational movement going on. And this is what's true in general for movements. And your handout will talk more about that. And that the deal is to make straight movements with a particular part of the body, such as the finger, you'll see that it actually requires a combination of different rotational movements. Okay? So there are two kinds of movements that you'll see in this bicep system. The movement called flexion, which is basically lifting your forearm up. So your forearm moves up. Another way to talk about this in sort of more biomechanical terms is the angle of the joint here, and you can think of this just angle being made here between the forearm and the upper part of the arm. The angle here in this cartoon, in this illustration, is 90 degrees. So a flexion is basically a movement that makes this angle smaller, that makes it smaller than 90 degrees. Okay? And in this case, what's going to be happening is that the biceps muscle is going to be referred to as the agonist. This is the muscle which is going to be shortening, okay, to create this particular movement. what you have then is what you have on the other side then is the triceps acting as the antagonist muscle. This muscle will be lengthening while this particular movement of flexion occurs. Okay, the other type of movement you'll have in this bicep system is the extension, and this is basically where the arm is getting longer. Now, in this case, the way it's illustrated here, basically now the forearm is dropping and you're going from 90 degrees to an angle bigger than that. But basically an extension is any movement, regardless of where the elbow is starting off or where this forearm is, that basically is increasing this angle, okay? And any flexion is a movement which is decreasing this angle here. Now in the extension, what's going on is that the triceps is acting as the agonist. It is the muscle that in this case is shortening, and the biceps in that case will be the antagonist. Okay, in this case, the muscle, in this case, the biceps will be lengthening. So this is the case in a lot of systems, though for the elbow system is particularly simple, where you have agonist muscles and antagonist muscles that are doing opposite things. Okay? Now what we're doing here is we're going to start looking at what the heart of what causes the muscle to contract or shorten in the first place. So here we have an anatomical diagram, very fanciful one from a nice textbook on muscle anatomy and physiology. Here you have the whole muscle, and what you're doing here is basically just looking at it at smaller and smaller components. Okay, we're not going to go into all these different kinds here. If you want to learn more about this, you can take and join my class, Bio 45100. But at the core here, at the smallest element, you have the place where the mechanics of muscle movement really happens. And this is this element called the sarcomere. Okay? Now the sarcomeres are chained together. These are these little kind of flat cylindrical objects that are chained together to form what's called a myofibril. And many of these myofibrils then together compose an actual muscle cell, okay, an actual cell within muscle tissue. That's what you're seeing here. Very long and elongated, these muscle cells. Whoops. Okay, what we're going to do now is zoom into the sarcomere and look at more what's happening here. So what you have in the sarcomere are these strands of proteins referred to as myofilaments. And what's happening then is that these are basically going to slide together, as you'll see here, and that this sliding basically is what's causing this, or I shouldn't say causing, but at the microscopic level, what's happening in terms of muscle shortening and lengthening. Let's go back out here. So what's happening here is there's two kinds of myofilaments, what we refer to as thick filaments, and they're composed of the protein myosin, which has, again, this very interesting structure for a protein, this long tail, and this myosin head here. And here's a bunch of these proteins kind of all strung together to form a particular thick filament. Then you also have, sliding along them, the thin filaments. Now what these are helixes of proteins, these globular molecules called actin, and they're forming these sort of helices, just like the same, similar shape to DNA, and then these molecules, and then you have these strands of molecules called, oh shit.